Here we go.
Pete, I got to get you one of these Podcast One hats.
Hell yeah, you do. Why are you holding out?
I'll get you one. I got to talk to Rob Ellen. He is the CEO over there, or Josh. Pete, this Josh guy over there at Podcast One, he's got hair longer than almost any guy you've ever seen. And it's just down like this. And when I met him, I'm thinking, well, this is obviously your guy that signs up the rock and roll guys. And he said, you're right. I am that guy. So, Josh, if you're watching, send some hats. I'm going to write to you this afternoon and tell you to send us some more Podcast One hats. Because soon, Pete, by the way, we will be in every Tesla vehicle through Podcast One. We'll tell you more about that, folks, but we've got the contract. We are inking the contract shortly. We had to take out an exclusivity clause because, quite frankly, we want to be in as many places as possible. But other than that, all right. Shall we dive in, Pete?
Let's do it. Macro
minute. Mine is existing home sales fell a little over 3% in June, Pete. Seasonally adjusted, that puts them about 4 million. That's the target right now to the annual rate. That's slightly weaker than expected, but again, that's existing homes. That's not D.R. Horton. That's not Lennar. Those guys are selling new homes, not existing homes.
Right. All right. Well, mine is going to be this, John. How about the dollar index, which actually got underneath 100 recently? It's back up there. It's actually pushing towards 101. I think that on top of the fact that the 10-year now starting to make another move again. You know, we gotten up to 4. We sold right off. We sold all the way down damn near to 370. Not quite, but damn near. And now all of a sudden we're starting to chop wood again and starting to move up. Something to keep an eye on. It doesn't mean anything right this moment, because as we've said, 4 is what matters. You start to get 4% on the 10-year, people start turning and saying, you know what, I'll take this and I'm going to get out of that. But we're not there yet, but we are seeing a little bit of a turn today.
All right. Now, time for Fantastic Futures.
Fantastic Futures.
Like a double animal style. He gave his and then Jared's pushing the buttons.
I'm telling you, Pete, if Kramer had Fantastic Futures, but he didn't, folks. We had that. Jimmy doesn't have that.
Right.
He has a whole bunch of other things, but that's one of our few other than the boring. That one. Yeah. All right. So I've only got 10 seconds left, Pete, so it'll be easy. Coffee futures are down 19% on the quarter. And yet, I bet you're paying more for your coffee today than you paid at the beginning of the year.
All right. I got 27 seconds. I don't even need all that. I'll tell you real quick, John. Oil. We've talked about it for a while. The end of June, it was 67. Now we hit all the way up to 77. Today, somewhere between 75, 76. So we're back right in that sort of category of the upper end over the last month. That being said, you've also got nat gas at 1 month highs at 275. So you're seeing energy start to push to the upside. Watch it at the pump. They will move a lot faster, John. When oil starts to move to the next level, gas goes even faster. So be aware of that as you get up there to the pump over the weekend.
All right. That's it for Fantastic Futures, folks. Let's dive into the stocks. And Pete, we are right at the first of several technical levels for Tesla, because Tesla came out with their earnings last night. They were down 4%, 5%. Now they're down about 8%, Pete. Revenue, great, 24.9. Profit, 91 cents versus 83 estimate. All those are good, but Musk actually came out and said, Pete, that he might not be done putting the pressure on his competition through price cuts. And that is why we're down 8% today.
Yep, it makes sense. Plus, John, let's be honest. Take a look at what that stock has done, as you know better than anybody. Year to date, 2 months, 1 month, 1 week, 1 day, it doesn't matter. Tesla's gone up, it seems like almost every single day. I mean, when you look at a stock that's up 160 some odd percent, year to date, it's clearly had a hell of a run, and it has. So I would say this, You're right. I thought the numbers themselves looked pretty good. Revenue was basically in line. But to your point, it's margins. And, margins dropped under 20%. I think people look at that. And the run the stock made absolutely pushed things as far as the PE is concerned, right? And I brought this up, I think, earlier in the week. But the PE earlier in the year, we were talking about something near 30 or less. And now you're looking at a PE that's more in the 80s category. So it gets a little spendy. And the fact that there's going to cut maybe prices, that cuts into margins. I think that combination makes a lot of sense why they're selling it today, whether it's 7%, 8%, 9%, whatever. But it might not last all that long, John.
Pete, I don't know if you highlighted this one in your notes, but they also said they're going to increase spending on AI.
Yeah.
And Elon's come up with yet another company. Why wouldn't he? It's called XAI. And, I don't know if he's going to be spending the money on his own XAI, but definitely Tesla's got a lot of data, more than anybody else in the EV space. And I think they're going to exploit that data, Pete.
And it's why, John, just real quick, it's why they aren't just an auto company. Every moron who goes on TV who says, oh, well, compare them to GM and Ford. You and I have been saying this forever, and we're conveying it still, which is they're not a car company. Yes, they do sell cars. That isn't the only thing. They've got all the data that you're talking about. That's huge. They also have the services. That's even bigger than most would ever imagine. Imagine this. If the services right now, John, they're thinking right now a little over $1 billion for 2023. They talked about $3.5 billion in 24, $5.5 billion in 25. So that is a monstrous piece as well. So there's a lot more going on at Tesla than just sending out the Model S and all these other things in the Cybertruck and whatever.
Yeah. And keep in mind, folks, when Pete's talking about services and so forth, number one, they've won the battle already for the charging stations and supercharging stations. But the real thing here is the full self-driving mode. That's an extra that you pay for, obviously, if you want it. And most people do want some form of that, depending where they live. They can go full self-driving. And the reason I bring that up, Pete, is they're saying that Elon said in the call last night, he's open to selling that tech to the other car companies. And again, you got to have the data to be able to do it, folks.
Right.
Otherwise, you're more likely to have problems with it. And if they end up selling it to the other auto manufacturers as well, Katie bar the door.
Yeah.
Just keep that in mind. All right. Netflix, Pete, down 9%. They beat on top line pretty good by about 40 cents or more. Their revenue was $8.19 billion. That just missed because they were expecting $8.26 billion. But I think what we've got here is another case of a stock that ran really far, really fast. And even though they're converting an awful lot of the former free riders into paid subs, Pete, I think people might have gotten ahead of themselves, and thus the $42 sell-off that we're seeing today.
And to your point, John, when you have a stock that moves the way this stock has moved in the last quarter, hell, for the year, right? I mean, it's had a pretty amazing run. So when you have a stock like that, you really do have to give everybody what they're looking for. One of those things was you kind of look for the revenue to get a beat. Well, the revenue was right around what they were expecting, but sometimes that's not enough. Just because they're expecting this, I think that actually means that the public is expecting even a little bit more. They didn't get that. And the guide for that even looks about the same. So I think that's an issue that some have. And John, let's be honest. This was a stock that was very, very, very cheap at one point in time that has gotten a little bit more expensive. I'm not saying that's the whole thing and that's why people are selling today. But let's be honest, the move that this has made to the upside, they had great earnings, but that revenue was an issue. And I think that's where they're looking, when you get a stock like this, they're looking for an excuse to maybe take some off. And I think that's the excuse right now is the revenue itself. They still have a lot of runway in front of them when it comes to these different ad tiers, but that will take a little bit of time.
Yep. And they are signing up an awful lot of those people, folks, for the cheaper version that is ad supported, but it's still not free. Amazon does something called Free V, but Amazon can do that because this is not Amazon's only business. Amazon has several others. They've got the streaming business. They've got the Prime, which is how you get the streaming business if you want no commercials. And by the way, they all are also the biggest retailer in the world online.
Yeah, that's a little bigger.
And then you might even throw Amazon Web Services in there, Pete. But yeah, who talks about that? All right, let's talk about Zion. Why? Well, because they missed on profit, but they just crushed on revenue. They are, of course, a regional bank based in Salt Lake City. They guided to slightly higher going forward. But the thing for you and me, Pete, is that there was unusual activity in there. And that unusual activity paid big dividends because the stock was $32, folks, when they were buying those upside calls. And they were buying them all the way up at the, September 42.50 or something like that, Pete. The stock traded over 38 today. So those calls, even though they were purchased for 45 cents, and even though they're still way out of the money, they went to $1.74 today. Bang. That's what I'm talking about.
I'd call that a bang as well, John. I think that what people really wanted to grasp onto was when the regionals are giving their earnings reports, they want to know, where do you stand? How are your deposits? Is there still any kind of an issue going all the way back to March when everybody was so concerned and we lost 3 of them, right? So with that all being said, Zion, well, they did add, let's take a look, $5 billion to their deposits in the second quarter alone. I mean, that says a lot. So the guidance there was strong. They've done a really great job of making sure that they've crossed the T's and they've dotted the I's and they've done everything that they need. But those deposits, I think, is what people were really staring at, John. They wanted to know how solvent, how these guys all look. What does it look like from the balance sheet and this, that, and the other? Well, those deposits look pretty damn good, especially when you've got deposits up more than 7% just in the quarter.
Yeah, you're exactly right. If it's just a drain, if you're just seeing people rush and try to take their deposits off of Zion, we'd have a whole different situation. But knock on wood, it's a positive one for the shareholders. All right. How about Infosys, Pete? This one down double digits. How come? Well, people were putting off. And by the way, these guys are the largest outsourcing place, I think, in the world, Pete. Infosys does an awful lot of that out of India, where the bulk of this gets done. And some of their deals are seeing, people aren't anxious to spend the money right now. As much as we're told all the time, this is a raging bull economy, it's not. All you got to do is listen when some of the big multi-billion-dollar companies talk, and they're talking about how their customers are tepid. They're not enthusiastic. They're waiting. And so this one down double digits today, Pete.
Yeah, getting hit pretty hard. I think it was down to about 10% or something like that, maybe a little bit more than that. This was a stock that you and I used to trade back in the old days on the trading floors, as a matter of fact. Interesting. We know it pretty well. IT services, that whole deal. Here's the problem for these guys as well. When you decide you're going to cut back on your revenue projections for 2023, not a good thing. How about this? You cut back on your revenue projections for 2024. That's definitely not a good thing. And to your point, what you brought up, John, is exactly right. They talked about delays, people not wanting to spend right now. I think when you're talking about massive companies like this out of India, and they're not seeing the folks out there attacking and wanting to do this and wanting to do that, and they're basically saying, let's wait a little while before we jump into that. That does say a lot about the economy and maybe the fact of where it really is, to your point, as opposed to what we're all told that it is. So interesting for sure. It makes sense why they're getting beat up a little bit today, because if you're delaying and you're not getting those orders, that's a problem, clearly.
Yeah. And like I said, and Pete said, folks, Infosys is big on outsourcing, big on IT. And if people are putting that off, that means that they're not confident in the short term anyway. Hopefully they will be more confident once we finally get to that plateau, that peak in interest rates, Pete, by the Fed. All right. So it's another day, apparently another scandal at Northwestern. Is that right?
Northwestern or Western? I don't know. Whatever it is. John,
Something bad.
these guys, you want to talk about a nightmare on the lake. How about what's going on up just north of you guys when you're up in Chicago anyway? But it is amazing. I mean, I got to think a lot of things are going on behind the scenes, John. Like, got to be conversations about the president of the university, got to be conversations certainly about the athletic director at the university, because we're looking at Northwestern as this great academic Midwest school. They do all these things wonderfully well. You're excited about things. Hey, you got a football coach that actually once in a while can actually win some football games, maybe even get to the Big Ten game and get a shot at something. Problem is this: they allowed too much hazing. Clearly, any hazing is too much, but they allowed hazing on the football team. They allowed hazing, for whatever reason, on the baseball team. Well, you know what? We all thought that was it, right? We all figured, well, baseball, maybe something else, probably not. How about the softball team? Yep, it was going on there. How about the volleyball team? Yep, it's going on there. It really is an amazingly infectious thing that's going on somewhere up there, John. And I can't figure it out for the life of me. I can tell you this, as a guy who was an athlete at the Division I level, Big Ten, and all the rest of it. First of all, there was a minor amount, even at the most, in football when I was there. And you and I talked about it. And when I became a captain, fortunately, my second year, that was over with. My second, third, fourth year, no, none of that was going on, because I just thought it was just stupid and I didn't understand it. So I didn't want anybody to have to suffer under that. We didn't have any issues with basketball. We didn't have any issues with any of the other sports. Maybe if there is where they push the envelope a little bit, sometimes the hockey players get goofy, and that type of thing. But, what we're seeing in Northwestern right now is absolutely unbelievable. And I'm just wondering, John, how do they pull themselves out of this? I mean, if you're sitting on the board, for instance, at Northwestern, aren't you sitting there looking at guys going, we don't maybe want to do it, but we got to get rid of these guys. I mean, what would you do if you were sitting on the board there at Northwestern?
Well, so I'm going to throw it back to you like this, Pete. They had an internal investigation. It was 6 months long. Okay. This wasn't just over a weekend and they had to rush to a decision. After a 6-month investigation, they decided that Pat Fitzgerald, the football coach, did not know. And the administration, after putting him on 2 weeks leave, said maybe we acted too harshly. And maybe they did. Time will tell. But as you say, Pete, apparently it was endemic to the institution. Apparently it was the basketball team. It was the softball team. It was the volleyball team and so forth, men's and women's. So this goes a little deeper at that point. Now, it still could be mainly the student athletes, Pete, because thus far, nobody has accused the coaches of anything except that they should have been doing a better job of supervising these young athletes, student athletes at Northwestern. Couple attorneys have lined up to sue them and so forth, Pete. There will also be lawsuits filed, I imagine, by Pat Fitzgerald's attorneys at Winston & Strong, big law firm in Chicago, to get his contract because, again, your investigations found I didn't do anything, and yet you fired me. You owe me $25 million or whatever the numbers are. So this is going to be very costly for Northwestern, obviously reputationally, even for just the students, because you can bet that people that had thought about going there are now saying, I don't know if I really like this kind of stuff going on at the school my kid's going to go to, or if I'm the kid, the school that I'm going to hang my hat on when I put that sheepskin on the wall. So I think, Pete, in the obviously the athletic director has to go. Maybe should have been the first one to go. I don't know the person, so this is not a hate by me of that person. But if you found nothing in your full investigation, then you've got a second one with the baseball team, and then a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth, you're gone. Yeah. So, and the sad thing is, Pete, that some rich alumni who gave them a bunch of money is going to find that money gets paid out to some coaches and maybe some players for these shenanigans that went on. And instead of going to build Northwestern bigger, it's going to be an embarrassment for Northwestern. That's my opinion.
It's sad. It's a sad situation, and almost every day. And I go to this gym, John, and when I go to the gym, the guy's next to me, one of the guys used to be an assistant coach for the basketball team in Illinois, and he talks to me and he's like, "Did you see the latest on Northwestern?" And I'm just like shaking my head going, what the hell is it today? I mean, it's like a daily thing. It's really too bad. And, we say that because, they went too far, whatever it was, we'll find out more facts in the future, but it is a shame that it seems like this thing has really turned into something much bigger than we first even thought. So I started with that one because I know this is our last Rebels Edge of the week. We always take Fridays off, travel day and all that kind of thing. So I didn't want to finish with Northwestern. So that's why I put the hazing first. I wanted to have a little fun anyway. So here's what I've got for you. Remember, I told you guys, you and Jared and everybody else, that you got to watch this quarterback on Netflix. It's just phenomenal. It's the coolest thing. And Peyton Manning and, the Omaha Productions and the whole thing did a great job of doing this. It's the #1 show on Netflix, guys. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. That's where they are. And who went to camp this week? Oh, a guy named Pat Mahomes, who's one of those guys. And Pat Mahomes is already in camp. He's already throwing the ball, and he's doing it, John. The leg looks great. If anybody forgot about this, during the Super Bowl, there was an issue, and he had a pretty major issue, actually. He's healthy. He looks great. He's throwing the ball like I've never seen before. And it's absolutely incredible. And some of the draft picks that they've had are out there, and they're doing a great job. They got a brand new wide receiver. They just seem to be loaded up the right way. And Andy Reid has done an amazing job. But, Pat Mahomes has been an amazing guy for a while now, John. He's still young, still got a lot of time. He and Kelsey and all the rest of these guys, they all want to be there now. I mean, it's amazing because a lot of the time, John, you start off with your rookies and then the rest of the team comes into play. These guys are there. They want to play now. They're ready, and what they're shooting for hasn't happened since 2003, 2004. They want back-to-back victories in the Super Bowl, and that's why they're all there. That's why that team is so committed, because it hasn't happened in a while, and especially when you look at the AFC this year and you look at the Jets and you look at what they've done, and then Buffalo, and then, you start going through it. I mean, it's not going to be an easy climb, but I'll tell you what, you sure do like the position that they're sitting in right now with the Chiefs.
You do. You have to. And it's going to be an exciting season. I really can't add anything to what Pete said there, folks. So instead, what I'm going to say is, I can't believe Belichick is on the hot seat, Pete, because according to ESPN and others, he's on the hot seat. All the guy did was win 6 Super Bowls. And unbelievable. But Kraft, maybe he's lost it. I don't know, Pete, because the problem with winning that many Super Bowls is, of course, you're drafting last every single year, because that's the way it happens, folks. Yeah. Worst to first. So you won the Super Bowl, you draft last. So that means he didn't get a lot of those players. Maybe he would have made a mistake like my Bears usually make, Pete, but he's been picking up stuff late rather than the top tier stuff. That's one of the smart things that the NFL has done. So I would throw that one out there. I think that it's amazing to me that guy with his bona fides is being perhaps shown the door. And I wonder who the heck they think they're going to get, Pete, for this bunch of guys up there. Okay, so that's the first one. Second one, Jets. Are you shocked that the Jets basically had to have their arm twisted to let Hard Knocks in?
They did not want it, John. They didn't want it because it's such a distraction and everything else that goes along with it. But that being said, we get to finally see Aaron Rodgers, right? We get the opportunity to see the real Aaron Rodgers, as opposed to he gets up at the podium, he kind of says a few things, he kind of mumbles around, he bumbles around, and then he gets the hell out of there, right? Now you're going to be able to see all these guys and see how they are going to get together and maybe make that run. He's a pretty older guy, we all know that. So this is a team now made to make the run now. and they've got the pieces. They got the defense. They got the offense. They've finally got the quarterback. They got running backs. They did a great job with the draft, free agency. You name it, they did it. But now they've actually got to do it. And you were just talking about Belichick. Well, he's in the same division. You've got New England Patriots, you got the Jets, you got Miami, who's got a heck of a quarterback too. And oh, by the way, a little team up north called the Buffalo Bills. I mean, that is a brutal group in the AFC. And we were just talking about Kansas City. Think about that, John. You've got Cincinnati. I didn't even talk about them. You know, we've got what's going on with Andre Hopkins, and he's now at Tennessee, and maybe the run they could make when you put him together with, you know, the big running back. You've got all these different AFC teams that I think people are rightfully so saying, you know what, this whole thing is tipped over towards the AFC right now. And I don't know which one of them is going to come out on top, but I would have to start with Kansas City.
Yeah. And there's a lot of talent there, Pete. I'm very enthusiastic about the season. I'm glad virtually all of them are getting in camp if they're not already in camp.
Yep.
And it will be a great season. Well, remember, folks, by the way, if you want, Pete does his sports huddle every Sunday from 10 a.m. until 12 on WCCO 8:30 a.m. in Minneapolis. It's also available on the Odyssey app. So if you're somebody on the East Coast, I guess that's 11 to 1, Pete.
Yep.
And if you're somebody out in California, still not too bad. It's from 8 until 10 in the morning, but it streams live with that big megaphone up there in Minneapolis, WCCO. That's Pete. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, folks. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you on Monday.